Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the NSCAC Presents Behind the Bench. Today we have a very unique conversation with former national player and coach Colin Miller, Paull Dolan, former Canadian national team goalkeeper and goalkeeper coach, Nick Ledgerwood, former pro soccer player and former Canadian national team player, and Patrice Bernier, former Canadian national team player and former Montreal Impact and player and assistant coach. My name is Valerio Rocca, and I'm the vice president of the NSCAC. We're going to be discussing Canada's national men's teams during the 2003 and 2004 year. If anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to use the chat box or the question and answer section in our chat. And good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the show. There's a lot of exciting times going on with the national team right now, but I think we'll save that discussion for later on in the chat. Let's start with Colin, former national coach. Colin, how was explain your time and your experience with the national team back then?
Yeah, thanks, Valerio. Thanks for having me on again. It was such a unique time. During the 10 games that I had in charge of the national team, I came to realize right away that I wasn't the guy that was going to be put in place as the permanent head coach. So there was a lot of times that I inherited a group of players that were in transition between coaches. And I guess my role overall, along with Paull Dolan, who was with me most of the time, if not all the time, was that we just tried to steady the ship and get things on a sort of even keel for whoever was going to take over, Valerio. That was probably job number one. And what I always wanted to do was try to make the guys comfortable, have them really enjoy their time coming back to the national team, because it was a period during all those years where there were players that were, for whatever reason, opting to play for club rather than country. And it wasn't an easy time. Even in the Gold Cup in 2013, we had one or two players leaving the group because they were going back to Europe to try to get a contract and get their stability in their livelihood. So I couldn't see that being the case nowadays with so many players being involved with top clubs. So that's a real positive nowadays. But back in that particular era, there was the phrase of unattached FC tagged to a lot of the groups that were being assembled. And in some cases, I'm sure these guys will attest to it, that there were players that were coming into the camps that the only first team minutes that they'd had with first team players was with the national team, and that in itself is quite a statement. But as I said, thankfully things nowadays are in a different mindset, and John Herdman's done a wonderful job with his group. So, but I'll leave it for some of the other guys to chime in there. But that was my primary role. But I can certainly say, hand on heart, that it was one thing being a national team player, one thing being a national team captain, but to actually have the privilege of being the interim head coach of our country was a thrill that was second to none.
Anybody else like to add to what Colin had to say?
I'll go now, because I guess Colin had appointed me as the assistant coach for this trip, and it was the first time that I'd been involved at the staff level as a coaching level. And obviously my main priority was to work with the goalkeepers, having been a goalkeeper with the association for many years, and retired in '97. And through the Holger Osiek era, I hadn't really been involved in any way. And then when Colin took on the interim role in November of '03 is when I was able to join him and do the dual role of assisting him. And really, I was just, if Colin talks about, keeping the team within the guardrails and just keeping things ticking over until a new manager was appointed, then I was just trying to do the same thing in assisting him through that. but working in particular with the goalkeepers, and my first go around with Lars Hirschfeld in particular, who's coming into his own as the primary keeper for the national team and would be for a number of years after that. It was something I was really excited about doing. We went to both the Czech Republic and Ireland on that first trip. So two really big, stiff challenges and intimidating places to play. And, you know, it was apparent right from the beginning that Colin had the guys going in the right direction. Tough results against good teams. But you could see that there was a sense of, okay, now we're starting to come back together again as a group, and there's a future here. Because he's right, there was an era, I think, after the Gold Cup in 2000, where that was a great high for the Canadian national team and the association. But after that, I think that there was a bit of a downtrend, and so the move was made, and Holger was moved out, and Colin came in, and I think that was the first step towards getting back to a proper national team, where Frank Yellick took over after Colin, I believe it was, and then you build it to where it is today.
Yeah, if I can add into that is, yeah, I have to give a lot of credit. Colin Miller will always have a place soft in my heart, because my first cap is given by Colin Miller. Yet before he gave me that cap, we were at the camp together, which was under the stewardship of Ozek Olger. It was in Estonia, and this was the first time I was being called up to the group. At the time, Holger had made it clear that playing in USL or A-League back then wasn't sufficient, and so I was now in Norway and Europe, and a few weeks later I get a call up to go to the national team. And in Estonia, I trained, felt I did well, and it was a young new generation, if you could say, because Julian Guzman was there, Thibaut Hutchinson, Jimmy Brennan was doing well, Paul Salter was still in Germany, so players were still young or coming, not yet in their prime. And I felt I had done well at the camp, but I didn't play a minute. Me and Mark Rogers specifically, we were the only two players who had not participated into the game, and we didn't understand why. But anyway, Holger had given us, you know, pretty much saying, too bad, guys, but there's always a next camp. And the next camp came along, which was in November, and then Colin Miller was now an interim coach. And I remember the first conversation with him as we got the camp in Czech Republic was Prague. Wasn't easy, because I think Czech Republic at the time was top 3 in the world. Pavel Nedved a few months later was going to be given the Ballon d'Or. So, but I remember the first conversation was he had told me that at the last camp, he had felt that I had done well, and that I had deserved at least a few minutes under the national team coach at the time, and that he was going to give me that opportunity to shine or to showcase myself at this next level with that camp. And at that time, we still had Thomas Rosinski was joining back in. Paul Pescisolido was there, and like Paull Dolan said, Lars, I was playing with him in Norway, and he was starting to become like the number one star position player in terms of a goalkeeper. And yeah, we played Czech Republic. It was a tough result, but it was a great experience. But I remember those words, because when you go to the first camp, you don't play. You're like, do I have what it takes? Do I want to keep playing? Like, will I prioritize Canada, because I was in my first few months in Europe, in Norway, and you want to establish yourself. You want to have, like you said, Colin, your livelihood established, and then say, okay, now I can go represent my country. And while those words were, Colin Miller was comforting and actually saying, okay, yeah, I do have the abilities. Now let me go prove it and show the confidence that the coach, Colin Miller at the time, gives it to me. And I remember I played the right midfield right in front of Paul Stalteri, and we had Pavel Nedved on that side, so it wasn't an easy task, but it went well. And I fell sick. I wasn't able to start the next game, but I still played against Ireland, and it was 2 tough games, but you felt that the young players at the time that were coming in, first caps or the first moments with the group, we felt, oh, okay, with Thomas Rosinski, Paul Pescisolido, guys who have been there before, but this new group could generate something. And I think Colin had had reestablished the confidence of being around each other, playing with the national team. And after those 2 caps, it was great because you could always say, hey, I played Czech Republic, number 3 in the world. Ireland was a great, at the time, was very strong. And then gave me those, you could say, clear moments to say, okay, I can play at this level and I want to represent Canada, and I'm ready for the next camp and wanting to perform at club level to be able to be at the next camp and play well, perform, and yes, forget about the result against Czech Republic, but mostly be able to say that we have talent in Canada, and in this young and up and coming talent can prove it, and for the next Gold Cup that was coming along in 2005.
Yeah, it's interesting, Valerio, that, you know, when I first got approached by the president of the CSA to be the interim guy, you know, the first thing I wanted to do was see the opposition that we were trying to play. And the first game was against Finland, in Finland. So I knew that Finland were playing against Wales, either in a European qualifier or a World Cup qualifier in Cardiff. So I asked if I could, you know, get back to watch Finland, because I knew they would be at full strength, obviously, for that game. So I think they managed to put some air miles together, and I flew back to London, and then on the air miles, and then rented a car, got up to Cardiff, and actually spent a full day with Adrian Heath, the Minnesota United manager, who looked after me that day. It was a fantastic day. I watched Finland, and then the next morning I was up about 4 o'clock in the morning, driving back to the airport to fly back to Vancouver again. So, but I wanted to try to make it as, not that Holger wasn't professional by any means, but I just wanted to make sure that I had my details sorted so that when the guys came into the camp, that I had an understanding of how Finland were going to play and how we were going to try and play against them. So it was, you know, it was a wonderful experience, absolutely wonderful experience. And, you know, I gave a few guys their first caps. I mean, this man here, Patrice, was one of them, and Jonathan Osorio, I think, was another one who got their first cap with me as well. So it was a real privilege. It really was. And I knew that, I mean, the first 3 games, Finland were 32 in the world, Czech Republic were actually 4th in the world, and the Republic of Ireland were 10th in the world. So it was nice that they gave me 3 real easy games to start with. You know, there weren't too many pub teams involved in those games. But I'll give Ledger a wee chance to chat here as well. But I just wanted you to know that, you know, trying to get air miles together so I could fly back to the UK to watch Finland, and it's a little bit different nowadays also.
Yeah, and I'll just piggyback kind of what Patrice and what Colin just said is, I think a lot of people still forget that, you know, 15, 20 years ago, we didn't have the resources to just hop online and scout teams and look at formations and tactical nuances with teams. You literally had to show up live to watch the team play, or else you wouldn't have the details like Colin said, that he had to go watch Finland. But I think, you know, the resources that we have now, you know, can't compare to what we had back in the day. There was a picture back when I was 21, 22, and I just first made my debut, and there was literally 5 coaching staff members. And now I see a picture of the team now, and there's 13 coaching staff members. The resources that are available now are completely day and night. And I think coming in as an intern coach, your job really is to make sure that guys are settled and they're at a happy place where they can play with confidence. Like you said, passing that on to Patrice, where now somebody can go into a game, their national debut, and not only are they making the debut, but they have the confidence to perform in that and make it a special memory for them as well, rather than, you know, kind of saying, oh, you're not worthy of it yet, you got to wait your turn. You know, it was the flip side of it when Colin was in as the interim. It was a good place to be. The atmosphere was really positive, and he gave the reassurance to the players that, you know, you're here for a reason, you're going to make an impact when you come in, or else you wouldn't have been selected. And I think that role in it itself is probably very hard, knowing that you are the intern coach, right? You may not be there for the long haul. You're just steadying the boat or the ship for the next coach to come in. And I think it's probably, you know, maybe a little hard on the ego as well, thinking, okay, well, I'm just setting this group up for the next coach to come in and take. But, you know, he definitely didn't shy away from any of the details or structure that he put into it.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback on that, Ledge, as well, just on the ego side, as we all know Colin Miller really well, that was something that was never going to be an issue, both as a player, as a captain, as a national team manager as well. He loves Canada, wants to do well by Canada, and wanted to do the right thing to set us up in the right way. And so much is often talked about which players get their first caps or get brought into the system and learn how to be part of the Canadian national team setup, but also the staff, as you mentioned. Like for me, I got my first coaching cap, if you will, right, with Colin in that regard. So he was looking to bring ex-players who were familiar with playing with the national team and groom them into becoming part of the staff and becoming integral members of the national team coaching system. And obviously I was able to stay from 2003 right until 2019. So I had a nice long run there. And I thank Colin for being the one who gave me that opportunity.
Yeah, I think your staff, for sure, and Ledge and Patrice, but now in the coaching side of things as well, that once you ever get a head coach's position, that it's very, very important that you surround yourself with people that you trust, and that was a big thing between Dolan and myself, and in fact big Mark Rogers, who came in on one of the trips as well. That, you know, we didn't have a big staff, for sure. I mean, I'm not sure if it was Ledge or Patrice that just mentioned the size of the staff that currently is with the national team. I think on the last trip there was 30 staff members there. It's actually hard to find out which one's a player and which one's a staff when they come onto the pitch. But it's wonderful. It's great. It's a sign of the times. But what needed to happen from my point of view was, if I left a room, I didn't want a knife in the back. I wouldn't have stood for any of that sort of stuff. And what was really important was the guys that were on the staff were there on merit. They were there because they were good enough to be there, and they had an opinion on football. You know, I remember I hold my hands up and totally messed up the system when we played against Norway, I think it was, or Denmark. Was it Denmark, Dolly, that beat us 4-0?
Right, yeah, before the US game.
Yeah, and I totally got it wrong. The players, I asked them to play in a 4-4-1-1, and it didn't work. I mean, Denmark was another top quality European side who were at the top of their game at that particular time, and it was, I think, 3 or 4 at half time, and we changed it in the second half for a little bit. But then I adjusted through listening to the staff. You know, I was open-minded enough to accept that, yeah, I had got it wrong. I held my hands up and I got it wrong. And then we changed the system when we played the States, who had been together for 27 days in a camp with Jurgen Klinsmann. And we went to Houston and got a very credible 0-each draw. And we could have won it in the end. I think, was it Julian that missed it? No, it was, I think Dwayne missed a very good chance at the back post, if I recall. But it just shows you, as a coach, your staff are so important, and that was because I wanted to enjoy myself as well, Valerio. I think that was very important. When you're in the coaching side of things, there's so much pressure on you full time, and if you're going into a room where you don't enjoy people's company, that just adds more to it. Then there's you're away from your family and giving up the time to be with the national team program. That was very important to me, that I actually wanted to enjoy my time as the interim guy. And I knew, as I said right from the outset, that I wasn't going to get the job, but I wanted to do a good job for our country and make sure the guys were comfortable, they were confident, and they had a staff that believed in them.
Which you've touched on a lot of keeping that transition very positive. And I think if you don't go into the room feeling that kind of happiness and enjoyment, everybody around you starts to feel it, and it just goes against everything that you're trying to create within that transition period. What were some things that you would have seen or would you have liked from Canada Soccer to help you and your staff and the players transition better from the Olga Osiak era?
Well, I got on very well with Holger Osiek, so I certainly won't throw him under the bus in any way, shape, or form. I had a very good relationship with Holger, and he was successful with the national team. You know, winning the Gold Cup in 2000, of course, that was massive for us. But I learned a great deal from Holger. One of the things that I could see, and I actually asked him if I could be a little bit more involved in the day-to-day training sessions, because I could see at times the players possibly didn't enjoy some of the sessions, and I asked if I could do a little bit more on field, and he said, "What do you think I am, a bean counter?" He says, "Your impact is very positive with the group." But I didn't want him to think that I was trying to stab him in the back in any way, shape, or form. I just had a very good relationship with the players at that time. I was a lot younger, obviously, and but the one thing that I wanted to make sure, Valerio, is that the training sessions were good. That these guys that are on the call just know, they know if they've been part of a very good training session or a well organized, well run session, they get something out of it. They've learned how the team, those principles that you're putting across in your training session, how your team is going to play. And I tried to do that, but I tried to keep everybody involved as much as we could and keep it as game related as possible. And I think that shone through. I think the attitude and the atmosphere that we had in the group, win, lose or draw, was going to be something that, well, at least it's a step in the right direction. And that's one of the big things that I took away. But in terms of the CSA, it was just a difficult time for the CSA at the time. They weren't. It wasn't, I'm sure, a wealthy organisation. Flying players in from all over the place and so on and so forth. I'm not making excuses, but it was a time where the national team program was in a bit of flux. It was which direction is this going to go? And so I can't even criticize the CSA, because anything that we had players that were there wanting to play for the national team. But as I said at the start, there were players who, for whatever reason, opted not to come in to play for the national team because their own personal situation was in a bit of turmoil. And some of the games that we play as a national team, and I went through it for my 18 years as a professional, you're out of contract and you have to try to, you make a decision. Do I go with the national team? Do I stay and try and get a contract with my club team? So the players were, in some ways in a difficult situation, but I understood that, having been a player, having been through that entire process myself. I mean, there was one season with Big Dolly, with our national team squad, that I missed 16 league games in Scotland. And, you're still being paid by that club. So it adds a bit of tension when you go back to your club side. So it's not always easy. It's not always easy. But the CSA, they gave us what we needed at that time. The strips and balls were all pumped up, all that sort of stuff. So it wasn't as if we were, we ate well. We travelled with everyone else. It was just a standard flight, so on and so forth. But it was what it was. It was just at that particular time, this is what they had to offer.
Yeah, if I can add on to that, just to give an anecdote, because it's the times, now. You hear we're finding Canadians easily through the internet. You find players, their situation, parents, and back then, even if I had been through the national team, I was in Norway, and not many people knew if I was in Norway. You didn't know who such and such, except for especially maybe the Stollies that were playing the big leagues. It was easier to access because it was the beginning of the internet, pretty much. And so people knew where still the big clubs or the big leagues. But when a player was somewhere else in a league that was not right now, you can watch a game in Norway or in Denmark, like Nick Ledgerwood is saying, you can have video analysis of any division in the world. So my first call up was the team manager calling me saying my parents were calling me. And I was wondering, okay, maybe something's wrong at home because it seemed urgent. And so when I called my father, he told me, CSA is looking for you because there's a camp. And it's just literally because the factor was not many people knew that I was in Norway, how to find directly Patrice. And I had been in a national program youth, so they probably knew how to contact my parents, or at least Quebec Soccer. And that was the process. Now it's easy, but I can't say it's easy. But John Herman can fly, and I remember correctly when Baloo but he was in FC Barcelona, but he would fly and sit down with Balou and talk to him about the national team. Back then it was, okay, we know we have players, but how do we reach them? So those were the times, those are the realities. And but we still had the camps. It still was professional when you got there. It still was up to the standards, but it was a reality that you didn't always necessarily knew where a player was, even when he was unattached, find a new club. It was through the grapevines of talking to such and such that was giving out the information. And that was the reality. It was not that CSA wasn't doing the efforts. It was just reality of you didn't have the resources of many of the other clubs who have scouts, who have people who are abroad. You, just like Colin said, he had to go watch, see for himself, and then analyze and take it and then give it back to his group. So that was the particular, but the great part of the time, because my father was the one who was telling me that, the CSA is looking for me to get a camp. So in a way, the anecdote is, it's nice to know that your own father is announcing to you that you're going to the next national team camp.
I think
it's the beauties of that time. And maybe I can't say it's different, but I would say for me, my storyline is, I take it that it's a particular moment that to get the announcement that way, which was the way it was a bit back then.
I think not only that, Patrice, but most other countries have a very high domestic league, and to find your players, they're probably playing in that country that they're representing. Whereas, we probably fielded a team that, at times not one player was playing in Canada because we were all scattered across the world. And now try to figure out where they're playing, what league, how do we fly them in? There's a lot of logistics that have to go with that, as opposed to, I can imagine Czech Republic, where 90% of their players are playing in the Czech. Well, that's pretty easy to get a hold of them, fly them in for a training camp. It's easy. It's done. The coach can watch all of their players. It's good. So I think Canada, with that, and then just the geographical sense where, you have 20 players in 20 different countries. Now you got to bring them together for a week training camp before a big game. And then not only that, you got to explain to the clubs, well, yeah, Canada's ranked 100th in the world. We're going to take them away from the club to go represent Canada. And like Colin said, the club's the one who's paying the bills. The club's the one who are playing these players. And at times they're missing out on games to go represent a country that was ranked 100th at the time, or in and around there, right? Whereas now, if you go tell your club, yeah, I'm going to go represent Canada, they're ranked 33rd. Oh, yeah, go ahead. You guys are top of CONCACAF. Yeah, please. Right? It's a little easier now than back in the day. I remember trying to tell my club in Germany, oh, yeah, we got called up for the Gold Cup. Well, no, you're not going to miss preseason. Yeah, but it's an international tournament. No, you're not going to miss preseason. You miss preseason, we're not going to have you in for the start of the season. So then you start pulling at a player who wants to play for the national team, but he knows if I leave with the national team, I'm going to come back and sit on the bench for 3 weeks. And that was the reality of it back then. So, it's hard to blame players of, they're leaving during a Gold Cup, or they're not coming in when called upon. But, that's their career. That's where they're getting paid. And if you want to be in the national team, you got to have a club team. We had enough players who were FC unattached, and they don't last long. Yeah. So it's a difficult one.
If we're talking about 2003, 2004, this is even before TFC, before any of the MLS Canadian teams and that base, and it's before FIFA windows, really. So those two things on their own probably changed things as much as anything. And before then, as Colin suggested too, and he played 16 games missing for your club team. Like that doesn't happen now because you have the FIFA breaks and you're not having to make choices. And now with the base of the Canadian teams in MLS, and not only the starting players within that group, but all the academy players that are pushing through. Like we look at some of the new players that are coming through the system, and a lot of good key young players have at least had some fingers in the academy, whether it's Alfonso or Tejan or Kyle Larin, whatever, they're all coming through that base now. Not all of them, but the majority of them are at least getting that first touch here in Canada. and it aligns much better. So as much as what resources could Canada have had or used better, they just didn't have the resources to overcome some of those things that now FIFA has mandated to give you the windows, and the Major League Soccer has given you an academy base and players who are playing regularly now at scheduled times.
Yeah, I had a conversation yesterday with Morgan Quarry about, Morgan was with the national team program for 20 years and did a wonderful job for Canada in terms of trying to get the players from all over the world into wherever we were meeting. And, the conversations that Morgan and I would have to try to build up a squad would last 2 to 3 hours at times, because he's having problems getting into the first team, or this one, he's in the first team, we can't get him out of the first team to come in. So something that Ledge was saying there as well, it's not easy for the players. So trying to develop a squad, I mean, even with the Czech Republic game, we had a squad of 15, 16 players that night. So it just shows you that there were a number of circumstances that were working against the national team program, and it wasn't a desirable country, if you like. When you look at the FIFA rankings, it wasn't a desirable country to go and play for in terms of the number of the ranking of the country. So there were a lot of things that even when I played, there was, the lads were saying, oh, if you have a checkered shirt, you get a game for Canada. You buy a can of Molson's, you get a cap for Canada. There was that time where we had a good side at that time, but I can honestly say that they were very envious of the trips that we were going on. It might be -2 in Scotland and you're training on a red ash running track that's frozen solid, and I'm thinking, guys, I don't know whether to take my flip-flops with me or my shorts, or what sort of lotion I should put on my skin to keep it nice and soft when it gets a bit red with the sun. So the lads were gutted, the fact that you were going away to play for the national team, but they would also give you a bit of stick because it was Canada.
Yeah, I remember, if I add on, because I was in Norway, so back then, the first caps. And let's be honest, when you play CONCACAF, a lot of the countries you play in are desirable destinations. So sometimes the coach would be like, are you really going to play, or you're going for vacation? Because when you play in Jamaica, St. Kitts and Nevis, Barbados, that's the reality of CONCACAF. You're spreading towards Latin America, Caribbeans, and there are destinations that most other countries, when they hear them, cities, it's where am I going? I'm going there on the holidays. And when your club is about to let you go, or telling, hey, I think you should stay, just like Nick said, you should, we have a big game coming up. You're probably just going to come on Thursday, Friday. The chances of you playing Saturday, but if you stay, you'll be able to play. And why go when you're playing such and such country? And, Canada, where are you ranked? Your chances of going to the World Cup are slim. So that was the talk that you would hear at club. And so club and country, you get pulled. And some were strong because you were probably a starter on your team. So you come back, you could get back into the line. But sometimes when you're fringe 12, 13, 14, or you had just got into the 11, and certain countries like Nick knows in Germany, where it's tough because they're like, next man up. You left, next man up. Too bad for you. You'll get your shot if that player doesn't play so well. So those are if you could say the adversity, the obstacles that back then, especially Canada not being ranked so high and the passport not being so desirable as now, where people, they see Alfonso, they see Jonathan David, they want the next one. Now Canada's seen as a destination where young talents, where's the next young talent that could be on my team and that we can bring to a top flight club? And looking at Canada prospering towards the CONCACAF, now they're like, oh, okay, Canada's looking to be on the world stage. And now people are talking about us saying, okay, how do we fare against the top 10 countries? Before it was, how do we even fare in terms of, look at your own zone, CONCACAF. So funny how the conversation, the narrative is changing, but it means that things have gone better, progressing. Let's not lie, the CPL, the player pool is now bigger. Colin doesn't have to go, okay, I got a 30-man list, but there's 10 guys are injured or maybe not playing. So what do I do? Now you probably have hundreds of players on the list, and you go, okay, Alfonso's out. Okay, we got a few other players that are on the list, and we know other guys are playing somewhere else, so we can cover in case something happens. So it's progressed a lot, and the academies, the CPL, Nick touched on it, the fact that you have your own domestic league. It says several things. For the youth, it tells them I can keep climbing the ladder no matter if I'm not in an MLS team or if I didn't make it right now. There is something looking for me when I'm 18, 24 to make that next step. And if I play there, maybe I make the next step to MLS, the next step to Europe, and so on and so on. And others, for Nick or for myself, we're able to come back to play at home and say, you know what, I do want to participate, bring my experience, because I've been abroad. I know how it is, but now I can actually play at home and play in my home city, or at least my home environment, and enjoy it, and enjoy the job that I had to go abroad to prosper and to make it. And now the reality is you can choose between wanting to stay at home in a domestic league or in a local league like the MLS, or going to Europe because you want to test yourself against the prominent players playing in the bigger clubs or in the bigger leagues.
And the next thing about that, of course, Patrice, are you guys being the future coaches of clubs and putting something back into the game. Not so much now as a player, obviously, but putting something back in, educating coaches and educating young players into these experiences that you've had in Europe and playing in the MLS and so on and so forth. And I think that's a great thing, to be honest with you, because that just means that the whole standard is being raised all across. Because I take Scotland as an example. When I did all my UEFA licenses, the vast majority, I'd say 95% of the candidates were professional football players. Some were coming to the tail end of their career, some were just starting their career. But what was happening, at some point, those players and those candidates were going to go back into the Scottish game at whatever level that was going to be, and the game itself was going to develop. And that's what I'm excited about as well, is that the lads that are playing now domestically are coming back to play, whether it's MLS or CPL, they're going to be putting something back into the game, and our country's going to benefit from it.
Yeah, and they'll also be able to inspire the players in these leagues what it means to play for the Canadian national team, right? And it just gives that 9, 10, 11, 13-year-old player right now with something to look forward to, a carrot or a light at the end of the tunnel of continue to work hard and you'll be able to go on to the next level of your career. You want to add something, Nick?
Yeah, I just said, I think Canada's always struggled to create a clear pathway for soccer players. And I think now that we're getting closer to this clear pathway and I'll say for male athletes, because I don't think on the female side we're there yet, but on the male side, we have our pathway of a CPL, the U Sports draft going to the CPL, into the 3 MLS teams. There's a pathway there. And I think like Colin said, the progression of that is there's a pathway for players, but now there's a progression of the players coming back into coaching roles. And now you have all these coaching roles starting to open up in Canada as well. So that's that full progression of the pathway to the player, to the coach. And now you're coming back around to help grow the sport in Canada. And you're starting to really see the potential of what soccer is in Canada. All the ex-players that are now getting coaching jobs or being involved in the national team programs, the CPL, the MLS. That's something that we never had before because there was no opportunity for it. We had the three MLS clubs, but that's only 3 head coaching jobs. The assistant coaching jobs below that. Now you're adding 8 CPL teams to that with the expansion of, hopefully another 2, 3 in the near future. And that's that full progression of helping educate coaches and giving them jobs and opportunities to stay in the game.
Which also I think it gives that national player a sense of identity and wanting to continue with Canada because they know that once their playing career is over, they can still stay in the game as a coach. And I think that's something back,
Yes,
in the 2000s. It hurt us. It hurt us a little bit.
Yeah, it's the ecosystem is flourishing, if you could say. A lot of people are still in the game. Before, you considered playing, but you never looked at it as, what am I going to do after playing? Yes, when you come towards the end of your career, okay, I might like soccer, I might want to coach, but you didn't know what's the avenue. How do I get there? Now there are coaching positions. You're doing your education. Not just that, but also you look at it that people are on TV, and those kids that are growing up, when you look at it, because of course there's the international stars. And if you look at Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo, but most kids at the first, they look at who grew up the same way I did, who started his soccer path the way I did, or a coaching path, because some coaches, some players don't necessarily make it, but they look, you know what? A coach inspired me, and I wanted to get into coaching also because of that. And I grew as a coach. I look at, if you take a Mark Dos Santos, who didn't necessarily play the game at the highest level, but is coaching now, and all the other coaches that are coming through. Nick is now in a staff. Jimmy Brennan was at York. Paul Starter was at York, is now at TFC. And you're seeing a lot more of those names, because Colin and Paul from their generation, like who's still around that we know. Okay, I know Nick Dasovic was playing at the time and is still coaching, but now it seems a lot more of the generation I was talking to Atiba not too long ago. He was like, okay, I can maybe do something for Besiktas, but for Canada, I'm scouring talents there. I'm working with CPL. So now clearer pathways are going and connections are being made, and people who have been playing before are now still vibrantly living through the game. I look at Julian de Guzman, who League One is now a owner, or Rob Friend, who's at Pacific FC. Those are conversations that when you're in Europe or other countries, it's normal. You hear the former stars, former players, they're still in the game at different levels. Now in Canada, it seems like Nick said, it's clearer. People can be technical directors of a club, or coach, or even want to be, because some guys did really well in their careers, might want to say, you know what, I want to own a team. I want to be an owner. I want to be a player owner. I want to dive back into it and grow the game in a different scope. And so this is a very good time for Canadian soccer in terms of we're rising on the field, in terms of the popularity that the men's, because let's not forget the women's have done quite well and have been pioneer. But on the men's side, it seems like things are slowly everything on the ladder is you're able to climb the ladder one step at a time. Before, back then, it was you had to make a big jump to try to make it to somewhere further of the objective that most players or coaches or anybody in the game wanted to do. And if you look at TV, I think those, you were doing a bit of TV. I'm doing TV also. There's other venues that keeps you still connected to the game and sharing it.
You make great points there, Patrice, because I think there's always been quality in Canadian players who went on to coach after that, but the number was so small relative to what we have as opportunities now. And because, as Nick mentioned, there's so many different pathways and the opportunities are there, it inspires former players to want to stay in the game because they have something to strive toward to make a living. I remember we used to kind of joke about, I'd see someone and you're one of the few people actually making a living from the game of soccer in Canada. And just like that, over what's happened over the last little while and will continue to be, I think people want to be involved in it. And with the opportunities there, it's kind of a burgeoning market that I think means down the road, Canadian soccer is only going to get stronger and stronger.
I think we have to continue this tidal wave. I think, like Patrice said, there's a lot more players that want to come back into the game and help grow it. And I think with the success that Canada continues to have is only going to motivate, current national players and former national players to give back into the game and try to recruit as many good players as they can. And you can see this shift because I coach quite a bit of players at the young ages, and a couple of years ago, you asked them who their favorite players are, and it was Messi, Ronaldo, And now that the narrative is starting to change, you're hearing more about, oh, I want to be like Davies, I want to be more like Buchanan, I want to be like Kyle Laird. So that shift in mentality from Canadian players is already starting to change, and there's a sense of attachment between the youth and the national team.
I see it every day when I work with the young players here in Abbotsford, as an example, Valerio, and when you say to the players that in my experience, I've worked with the Christine Sinclairs, the Sophie Schmidts, along with John Herdman when he was in charge of the women's side, and then Jeff Paulus in particular did a fantastic job with Alfonso Davies in our academy at FC Edmonton. He came through and I worked a couple of sessions with Fonzie. And when I say to the kids that I had a chance to work with Fonzie and some of these players, that you can see their faces lighten up. So we become real role models. The players become real role models for the next generation of kids coming through. And the exposure of the game now on TV and the internet and so on and so forth is worldwide. So the kids now get the chance to follow them. The video games, all these things, the profile of all the players now is not what it was all those years ago. I think it's black and white video game that I was in at the first one, that it was that long ago. But it's just raising the profile of all the players, and that in itself helps to raise the profile of the game.
Yeah, and it's something we have to continue. Having said that, a few years ago when you talk to young kids, none of them knew when Canada was playing, and you ask them now, and they all know when the next game is, and how can I get tickets, and how can we go to this, and it's the times are changing. We're hosting a World Cup in 2026, and how big would that have been for all of you if you were playing in a World Cup at home?
Yeah, absolutely. It's through the roof. In fact, I was on TV and radio giving the people in Vancouver stick because they didn't jump at the chance of hosting right away. And now the bandwagon has shifted slightly. Now their eyes are wide open. If it was an ice rink, they would have built it and supported it. But
yeah, I got the same thing here, Colin, because Montreal just left the table, and now they're probably going to regret it. So,
yeah, it's a wonderful time to put the country and the game, forefront for a change. It's a great opportunity for us.
Yeah, it's exciting times, and we have to all continue to move forward to get ready for 2026. And what are some things you're looking for in the remaining CONCACAF window and for the World Cup going forward?
Well, let me jump in here. Is that the run that this group is on right now is incredible, because a lot of people talk about, the fact that, okay, there's 3.5 spots that made things a lot easier, but they're going to win the table. They're topping it right now, and the way they're playing, I just have confidence that this team can not only scrape into it, but be the dominant team as they have been throughout this qualifying session. It's just been terrific. So I think that's something to kind of drive home, is that we're not just happy to get there. And I know John Herdman said this many times, is that he expects to go to Qatar and do some damage. He won't say right now, like we shouldn't, that they're there, but let's be honest. I can say it, they're going. And I think that they could cause some teams some problems there. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is a continued building of what they've put, and not rest on the laurels, the fact that they're pretty much a cert.
I agree. I think that the fact that we've had our strongest team that we've had in a number of years, and a combination of maybe some of these other countries been in a bit of transition, and take nothing away. I'm not taking anything away from our guys at all, but they've just, the timing is just aligned perfectly here now for us to really kick on. We deserve to be on top of the group. There's no one can debate that, that's for sure. We've also had a couple of breaks that you need to have. I mean, the goalie in Haiti, looked like he had about 10 pints of Guinness when he was trying to clear that one off the line at one point. And, the physical impossibility that happened with the Tebas goal in the last round there as well. So you need to have a couple of these breaks, but we're now going into these countries expecting to get a result with the players that we have there, which is fantastic. And you know, the work that, I mean, Dolly and I have been on John Herdman's staff a number of times, and we know the detail that he goes into with all of his staff members, and there's no stone left unturned. I mean, I've been in John's basement when we've been going to tournaments and so on. You'd actually think you're going to war, because there's not a wall that's not covered with information regarding what's coming up. So there's no surprise to me that his attention to detail, players looked on the outside, from the outside now, they look as if they're buying into it. But when you get on a run like this, and we've all played on teams, when you get onto a good run, it's a great feeling, and the country is buying in, Valerio, which is brilliant to see. You know, everywhere I go, people are speaking about the national team program, which is unheard of. You know, I can't recall too many times people actually stopping your street and asking, "Oh, how well are the national team doing?" So it's great to see so much positivity now, and the women, of course. I'm not excluding the women here at all, but it's fantastic for me to see that the men's program is now where it should be, and these players have been very good ambassadors for the game.
Yeah, you can't find a Canada jersey right now. That's how popular it is. It is, and it's good to see. It's fine as a Canadian that's been around all my life here and have supported soccer. It's great to see what we've done, and a lot of it has to do with, you know, when you were around, Colin, you all of you played a role into where we are today. And everybody had a small piece to play, and we should all be proud of what's happening with the national team and also the future. I think the future looks very bright. Final thoughts?
You could say doing well. Canada's growing. A lot of young talents, promising. It's on the rise. We talk about 2026, but 2022 is pretty much something that will, you know, set in stone for 2026. Well, tickets or jerseys will be hard to find, but all I want to say is I'm glad that I got to live it with Colin Miller, Paull Dolan. Had a few caps and laughs with Nick Ledgerwood when we had some camps. Those are the storylines. I know Colin Paul had the years before, way before. I think Doles is the only one who probably 86 is something that you know, you could say I've seen what the World Cup and qualification is, but to be here and knowing that we worked at it, it was a grind, but to now see this group and Canada talking about it, because the biggest thing I've had is now that I'm on TV. When the guy says, you know what, we're going to screw the hockey because the Canadians are not doing so well. Let's talk about Canada soccer. This, I would have never heard this before. And now these are the times where we're actually putting soccer on the same level as hockey in terms of talk. I know in the country, hockey will still be the number one sport, but the talk of the town is Canada soccer. And what the possibility of going to Qatar and playing in Edmonton in the snow, things that are Canadian and are now flourishing on the soccer stage, where we've said to everybody that we're not just a hockey country. We are a soccer, and we do develop talent, even though we did it before. But now people are eyeballing Canada for the next up-and-coming talent and watching to see what's next.
Yeah, I agree with that as well, Pat. I think everybody was just picturing this, that Canada is going to help co-host the 2026 World Cup. That's going to be our shine. That's going to be the time to boost soccer in the country. And now everybody's thinking, oh shit, we got to fast forward 4 years because we're going to do it, this fall. And I think everybody's now thinking about their plan or their business model of, okay, how do we piggyback when we co-host the World Cup, when in fact it's 4 years prior to that if you look at the bigger picture, Canada is going to play in 2 World Cups in the next 5 years. We could never say something like that in the history of soccer in this country. And now to not jump on the bandwagon, to not piggyback it, to not help grow it. I mean, this is just going to be a massive boost for anybody who's involved in the game in this country, I think.
Yeah, I remember in '86, at the age of 20, thinking, bloody hell, I've got 4 or 5 World Cups in me. But we didn't have the base of what we have now. And let's be honest, with the tournament expanding as well, and this back-to-back momentum that we'll have, because I agree, Nick, it's going to be 2 World Cups in 5 years or 4 years even, if we look at it that way. Even less than that, because it's a November World Cup, isn't it? Anyway, that's besides the point. What I'm getting at is I think now if you're a young kid coming into the side, you could honestly say, I'm going to play in 4 or 5 World Cups, because I think the foundation's been set now. And I like what you said there, Valerio, that, you know, players like Patrice and Nick, and obviously Colin too, they've all been a part of the stepping stone to get to where we are now. I know it's a small part in a longer period of time, but it takes those builders to put the thing in place to give a platform to where Canada is now. So, you know, I'd like to give them credit too, and the players who kind of came before this group, and the coaches who came before this group, to set things up to where they are now, so that Canada can succeed for not just the short term, but I think for the long term.
Yeah, totally. So stole my thunder there a little bit, but and I agree 100%, because the players that have been in the past, there's been some very good players play for Canada. There's been some very good teams as well, and the timing of this group, as I said earlier, you know, getting to the levels that they have, you know, that's a testimony to the work that's being done at the youth level, the academy level, coming and the opportunities worldwide now for our players. That, you know, in my time, you know, for a player to go and establish himself in Europe, there was only a few of us that did that. You know, myself, Frank Yallop, Craig Forrest, Pescasolido eventually got across there as well. But there was a few other lads, but it wasn't wholesale like it is nowadays. There weren't those opportunities, and now you look at the opportunities that are within the country. There's no question that the standards will be raised and the expectation levels will be raised as well. That's one of the things that go along with it. But it's such an exciting time to be a Canadian football fan. The guys in the CPL are doing a fantastic job. The standard is great to watch as well. And they're producing young players. They're giving young coaches an opportunity. They're giving you know, young managers and or office people getting a chance to work in the professional environment. So the whole situation about the professional game is there. And then you have the MLS that you know, has set the benchmark for a number of years now. So I can't remember the future being as bright as it is at the moment. But I agree, there was a lot of work done, and a lot of players have passed over under the bridge, as they say. And I think a lot of credit goes to those lads who put their heart and soul into playing for our country, because we might not have ranked at the highest at one point, but I'll tell you, the guys gave everything to play for the country.
Colin, Patrice, Nick, Paul, thank you very much. It was an amazing conversation, and I enjoyed it. And we should definitely do this again, because I think it's important to continue to raise the game in Canada as much as we can in all different avenues. So thank you very much for your time, and stay safe.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Guys.
Everybody.
Really appreciate it.
Cheers.